Okay, so let's do an example where we pass an array as an argument to another function, and then we'll also return the argument or the data back as an array type. Okay, so the concept is still very similar to how you write functions and return data type. It's exactly the same, except you get an array back instead of an integer or a string, right? So I'm gonna go and just comment all these out. And make sure I have all these are turned off. I don't want to duplicate these. Okay. So inside here, I'm going to write a function here, and we're just going to write a function to, maybe duplicate the data of the array, and then we'll send the new array back to where it was being called. So up here, this is the main. This is the main. Okay, and this is still the main program here, the main method here. So we're going to declare an array of integer. Just put numbers in here. Just put some random number, 12, 24, 50, 75. Okay, and we're going to write a function to basically double this number and then send it back as a new array. Okay, so we're going to have like an integer of a new array, new numbers, and this new numbers is going to be assigned to a function called doubleIt. DoubleIt. We'll pass in the array numbers. Okay, and then when it comes back, the array new numbers should store the values 24, 48, 100, and 150. Okay, so just basically duplicate that. So I'm passing here the entire array. Okay, so it's an object of array. I'm not passing a single value. If I want to pass a single value 12, then I would do this, right? I'll pass in the number 12 to that function, and then the incoming data, we just had a very simple primitive value, which is the constant number 12. But I'm not doing that. I'm passing the entire array. So when you write your function, here will be public static. I'm returning it back, right? It's not a void. I'm returning back. The array type here is number, an integer, so I have to use integer here. And the name of that will be doubleIt. I could just say double array, but inside here I have an integer type called, I could just call numbers as well. Okay, but I'm passing to it an array and not a primitive data type, so I have to put these square brackets here. Okay. Not only that, I'm returning back an array. So the return type must also be an array. Okay? So wherever all these data types are declared, you have to use the curly these square brackets. Again, you don't specify the data size in there because you don't know what the size is. It could be any size, right? So you can't put the size in there. And then now, because it's a return function, you need to put a return type. So down here we say return something. So to double every element in the array numbers that's passed through, we need to then do a loop, right? So we need a for loop for int I, starting with 0. And then I is less than the number's length. Length. So your typical for loop. Then we need to double the value inside numbers. Numbers of I. times 2, right? Double it. Oh, I'm sorry. Number times equal to. That's multiplied by 2. And then we return the numbers back. Right? So that's all it does. It iterates through the array, every element at a time, and then we'll double the number, the value, and then once we're done, we return the numbers array back. Okay. And then now the new numbers should store those new numbers. And so up here in the main function, we can go ahead and print those out. We'll use that for each loop to print it out. We'll print both of those to see if they really are the same or not. Okay, so we'll do the first one, which is the numbers. So I'll just say for number, int number, for every number in numbers, right? Print them out. So this will be number. So that's all the numbers in the number array. And then we'll put a separator there, put some lines there so we know that's the next item. And it's the same thing. So for int type be new number, inside the new numbers, and then just sys out the new number. Okay? And run it, print them out, and see what the numbers are. And see if there's any things in there that might be different. So I run it, and then oh, what do you see? I got the same numbers, right? The same values. They're both arrays. So the first one is from the numbers. I print them out, I get 24 instead of 12. It's like I'm printing the new numbers here. And so you might think, wait a minute, because I showed you earlier that if I put, if you say new numbers equal to numbers, if I change the numbers values, it also changes the numbers, right? I just showed you before. But here I'm not making copies of that, or do I? So, okay, so you're saying that numbers and new numbers are pointing to the same memory address, right? And we can test that to make sure that's true or not. Okay, so after I make this call, if that's true, then if I change one of these numbers, let's just say if I change the new number's first number, after I got it back, say I'm going to change the new number of the 0 to, let's just make 0. Instead of 24, that new number should be 0, and that's true, then both of the first elements should both be 0, because if they're pointing to the same memory address, that should be true, right? Okay, if I run this, so the second one shows 0. First one is also 0. Right? So yes. So that's why it's very, very dangerous in Java when you do something like this. Be really careful when you do something like this. Because I pass it through the function, I change the values in there, I'm returning back the value, the array of numbers, right? I'm returning here, I'm passing through a reference object to this array, this function. I change its data, I return it back. I'm returning not a new array, the actual numbers array back. So it's the same thing as saying I'm assigning new numbers to numbers. Okay? So be very careful when you do that. If you want to do something like this and you want to change, return back as a new data, then in here, you have to make a copy of the new numbers to a different array, and then when you clone it, right? You clone it, and then you send it back, so you don't have that issue here. Okay, so instead of doing like that, you would say int temp, maybe temp number is equal to numbers clone. You clone that, and then now you can use the temp inside here. So don't manipulate the numbers. And even if you don't do that, if you change here, if you don't return the numbers back, because the numbers comes in here as a reference. So if I make any changes in here to the numbers array, it's going to reflect, it's going to make changes to the outer numbers here as well. Remember, you have to follow the trail, right? It goes wherever it is you make changes, it's going to reflect the actual data here. If you don't want to do that, then make sure you make a clone first, and then returning the temp here instead of the actual numbers. So that now the original array is not altered, right? You have the original array here, and then the new array here has the new value, and we just show that we changed the numbers 0 to 0, so it didn't affect the original array here, and now it's safe. So when you program, you also want to be very defensive in coding. Make sure you don't accidentally delete all your data. Okay, so that's passing array to another function. I'm returning back, that's why I put it here, otherwise it'll be just void, and you change some data and then you're done. Okay, so very, very simple, this one. Now the next one is we're going to do an array of objects. So to do that, I'm going to create another function, another class in here. I'm going to create a new program here. I'm going to leave this as is, and we'll create a new one in the same package. So I'm going to create a, let's call it main program 2. And this is the main application, so we use the main method here. And then I'm going to create another class, and we'll just call this one here of, what should we call it? We'll just call it, I don't know, student is fine. This is a standard concrete class called student. Okay, and the student object, or student class, we're just going to have maybe just one field for now, and that field is just going to be the name. So we'll just have string of name. And we'll have a constructor just to set the name to a default name. Well, I mean, if you pass to it, so public student of string name, and then this name is equal to the default name. We should create a setter and getter for that as well. So we'll just right click, sources, and then setter and getter for the name. Okay. So very simple one. Okay, and then in our main program, we're going to create an object, student object, but it's going to be an array of students, right? So you have, so again, the student class is a template, and then instead of creating like student 1, student 2, student 3, like we did with the sandwich, 1, sandwich 2, and 3, so on, you can now use an array of students. So a student will be as a type. So again, you treat it just like a regular data type, right? Int with the brackets, or string with the brackets, and so on. And the object will be just like before, student of students. Okay. Notice I changed the singular to plural now because it's an array of students. Okay? And instantiation will be a little bit different. Instead of saying like new student before, we say new student like that, right? Okay, when you create an array, you're not going to use that paren anymore. You will use the brackets and then specifies the number of students. Let's say you have 3. So this is just the way how you declare an array before, right? Except it's a class called student, and we just created that class. That is exactly the same as saying string students is equal to new string of 3. So here again, I'm declaring the actual size of the array of 3 students. So I'm fixed at that number of students. Okay, but don't forget that you have to do for each student here. Okay, it's a student object, right? So I have 3 students. It's an object array of student object. In other words, when you create a regular student, do a single student, call it student 1, we say new student, and I pass in John, right? Because we have our constructor takes a name. So now that student 1 is now John. Now, what the array, you have to be really careful because each of these elements here is an object itself. So in other words, it's the same as saying I do 3 of these, right, inside each of those elements. If I do student 1, student 2, student 3, so I have 3 students, Larry, and then maybe Sue. Okay, so I have 3 student objects. I manually do them the old-fashioned way we did, like the sandwiches 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So now with this array, I have to do the same thing here, except I have to do like this. So students of 0 equals new student. We'll call this Alex, you guys. So students 2, which is index of 1. Okay. Students of 3, which is index 2. Student. Okay, you see how they are created? I can't just go with students of 0 and then assign that as a name with something. I have to instantiate the object first before I can use it. So each of these elements here is an object, and I have not instantiated those yet. So I can't suddenly just say student 0. Yeah. Right. So that's how you do an array of objects. If these objects are your classes you created yourself, then just make sure you instantiate it that way. Okay, this is one way. You can do it the other way, like you did with this, right? We did something like string of fruits, I just showed you earlier. We can do that as well, right? Same thing. This is a string. We can do with the class, with the student as well. I can just say students of maybe students 2, maybe group 2, right? So it's a different group now, and I just do this. But inside here is each new object. I can't just put like Alex or Gary or Robert in here. It won't work because those are not objects. So to do that, the first item, I have to say new student, right, Alex, and then new student, okay, and that's just 1 R or 2 R's, sorry Gary, and then we have new student make it right. Okay. So again, you can make it a new line. It's easier to see this way. So here I instantiated 3 objects, and they are also initialized, right, in a single statement. Okay, so just make sure you always instantiate that object before you can use it. And this is one of the confusions where a lot of students are forgetting to instantiate those objects. Okay. So in this example, I'm doing it here in the main method. So now I can iterate through the list. For example, if we do student 2, you do the same thing as before. You can say for of the student type, right? It's not a string anymore, it's a student type. For each student in the students 2 group, okay, has to be it's an object. So each student, now this student is an object. I want to print out its name, then I'll do system out, put student.getName. Right? You use the function call to get the name and print it out. So you just have to be careful what type it is. If it's an object, then you have to access with the object and not a string. Okay? And then now if you print this out, you should get those 3 names out to the console. So good? Okay, we'll do one more, and then I'll go ahead and talk about the other types. So again, at this level, in the main method level, you create a student object as an array of n elements. This case is 3, and you instantiate each one here. Okay, and then once you instantiate it here, you can go ahead and call their names. Now, when you have inside a class, say if you go back to the student class, okay, let's just say I'm going to add another array in here. It could be another object. And I don't want to go, well, I'll wait for the object. Maybe next time we'll do it. That one. I was thinking like this, you can have a student, maybe you have the composition, right? So you have another class, maybe not student, but you have another class called courses. So the student have a class can have like a courses object in here, and so you would do something like this. You don't do this, but I'm just going to show you. I have a class called courses of maybe like new courses. Maybe you have 3 courses. Okay, so you have another object with an object. In this case, it's a composition. So just make sure when you call the student courses, it will be like student 0, right? Or as here, it doesn't matter how you do it. Student 0 dot courses of 0, right? So another will be like this. So student of 0, this is Alex's course, dot courses of 0 equals new courses, right? You see how the chain goes in that way. Okay, so it gets confusing, but you have to do that. If you have compositions and it gets complicated in there, I mean, it's very powerful once you understand, once you get it. That's why, I mean, if you can't envision this in your head, just map it out, draw it out, and then you will be able to do it better that way. But instead of a composition, I would do something like this. What if you have like an integer type of scores? And the scores could be like unknown size, right? You don't know the size of the score, but when you initialize the student, you can pass in the size here. So I could say int size, and then when you create a student, you will pass in the name along with the size of the scores, right? And you can have different sizes. Different objects have different sizes. Maybe Alex only took two exams, and Gary took 5. Okay, so you can track each independently because these are an unknown size. You didn't specify that. If you put like size 3, then you're done at 3, right? So if you leave that blank, and then the size will be based on the size passed to it. Okay, I mean scores. Will be int, a new int of size. Okay. So I'll pass in the name Alex. He took 3 exams. So I created scores array of three exams. Okay. So in here, I will then say when I create Alex, you can see he has all these problems now. John will have maybe 1 exam. Larry has 3. Sue has 3, and so on. So Alex has 2. Gary put 3 here, and Robert has 4. Right? So same thing. Same thing. And then once you have those scores, then you can set those scores. I didn't have the getter and setter, but you would do the setter and getter, and then you would pass the scores in there. And how you do it? You could have passed an array of scores. Okay. Here, just use the array size. Instead of that one, you could say this is an array of certain scores, and then you would set this score base equal to that score, right? And then you're done. Okay. So there are lots of ways to do it, but this is one of them.